Hi, welcome to the Dr. Lisa Solzenti podcast. I'm Dr. Lisa, and today we're going to talk about cholesterol. I know that there's been a lot going on social media about cholesterol. If patients come in and they're really getting educated on this topic, it's exciting to see. And I want to just briefly touch on this podcast some of the major points. And I want you to know that this isn't for medical, treatment. I'm not treating you. I'm not telling you to get off of anything. But this is a great podcast that you can have the discussion with your medical doctor. Maybe seek out a functional medicine practitioner like myself if you want to go deeper. And also, I have a book here that you can get that I absolutely love. I'm going to mention it right off the bat. His name is David Brownstein, and his book is called The Statin Disaster. And I'm actually going to pull from here and discuss it a little bit with you, but this is a great book if you're questioning cholesterol and the way we have been taught it. If you're not too sure about statins, if you're feeling uncomfortable or unsure, this is a really great place to start. So this podcast is for educational purposes, so I can lead you in other directions to answer your questions or help you with this topic. So again, the book is The Statin Disaster. So check that book out. And then also, if you have any questions, you can always book a consultation with me or a functional medicine practitioner of your choice. So you can really dive in deep and learn more about this. Another person that is great with this is Barbara O'Neill. So that's another great way to check this out. So if we talk about cholesterol, we have to, of course, it's going to address the statins because these are the major magical drugs that have come about to solve the problem. So the problem would be high cholesterol, and the solution for the medical world is statin drugs. And if you dive deeper into this, if you like research, if you like studies, David Brownstein backs this all up with studies, so that's why I love his book. And the studies really prove that these drugs aren't doing what we think, or they're not effective as we say. And that actually there's been cohort studies where the statin drugs are only, the benefit percentage rate is really 1 to 2%. And that means it's not really helping 98 to 99% of the time. And you can summarize these studies as they do not significantly increase cardiovascular events or heart disease, strokes, and death rates with heart disease. So it's really one of these crazy wonder drugs, because I say I've had friends in pharmaceutical that were reps, and they have told me that Lipitor is the #1 drug selling marketing genius of the pharmaceutical worlds of all times. And they have their stories behind that, and they really kind of know what they're talking about with it. And you especially get into these deep conversations after they retire, and they can talk to you about the drugs. So it's crazy. You really can research the literature on statin drugs. The literature out there also shows, and I'm going to summarize this for you, and then I'm going to get into it, that what increased cholesterol is really, it's a buoy. And it's telling you, like, hey, something's going on. And if you've listened to a lot of my podcasts, what I talk about is an iceberg, right? A lot of it is just the tip. And a lot of medical world is just looking at the tip of the iceberg. They're treating what they see. They're treating the symptoms. So I see cholesterol as a buoy out there in the water saying to you, hey, something's going on. And what I like to do with you and my patients is, like, we put our scuba gear on, I hold your hand, and we dive deep, and we look at the iceberg underneath it. So what you want to see is what is causing this increased cholesterol. And high cholesterol has been linked to inflammation, really the #1 thing. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what's causing the inflammation? So this could be hormone imbalances. It could be infections in the gut, in the body, in the bloodstream, toxins. So there's heavy metals, there's viruses, parasites, gut pathogens. In the gut, we've got bacteria problems in there. We've got a leaky gut. We've got microbes, negative gram-bacteria that can actually live in the gut and get out of the gut and get into the bloodstream and create problems. Nutrient deficiencies are really a big problem with high cholesterol. And when you have nutrient deficiencies, so your B vitamins, your vitamin D, your minerals, all these nutrients, these micronutrients. If you're not too sure, I have a podcast. I think it's our number 40. 43, we talk about micronutrients versus the macronutrients. And so nutritional deficiencies is actually, you know, that would be the iceberg. That would be when you dive deep, you see these deficiencies. Nutritional deficiencies cause endocrine problems. They cause dysfunctions in other tissues. They do cause other health issues. For example, I'll just use the basic one that I've talked about on my podcast, is if you have magnesium deficiency, B2, B3, if you have problems with vitamin C and things like that, iodine, you could have a thyroid problem, and that thyroid problem can increase the cholesterol. So when I see high cholesterol in a patient, I'm not like, oh my gosh, we have to put this person on a drug. What I want to do is I definitely want to look at their diet and their lifestyle, but I also want to say, what else is going on here? You know, do they have high estrogen? You know, are they not breaking down estrogen? What phase is the woman at in her lifestyle also? So nutritional imbalances, toxins, which could be bacteria, heavy metals, gut problems, leaky gut, inflammation in the gut, a dysfunctional gut wall, any kind of infections. Think of your teeth as well. I had a problem with this with myself, major tooth infection that was found on thermography when I was getting my breast done. I said, hey, could you run the thermography on my dental? And we found a major infection that's a whole story, another story that I don't want to get into, but that can be creating your high cholesterol. So, you know, and dental infections definitely affect cardiac. What is cholesterol? Let's talk about it, because there's a whole misconception, and I learned a lot of this. I'm going to tell you, this isn't new. This is something I was taught, that cholesterol really isn't a main problem, that cholesterol sometimes doesn't come from the diet, that cholesterol is a buoy telling you that you need to look at other areas and systems of the body. I learned this back in the 1990s. But we didn't really know enough, as much as we know now, about functional medicine and really how it's starting to relate to like thyroids and things I just talked about. So cholesterol, there is literature out there that also links, especially for people over 65, that if it's high, that you actually live longer. And I know that's going to be like, I can't believe Dr. Lisa just says this, but there are a dozen studies that actually show no link that low cholesterol saves lives. And they say that it actually, if it's high, and we're not talking super high, we're just talking about in a range, and they argue this number, 220, 280, but, and maybe some people think it's higher, I don't know. You want to read a book called The Cholesterol Myths. That's another great book. And but they do know that the studies don't show a link between low cholesterol and saving your life. They do see links with women, particularly women have higher cholesterol than men, and that we live longer. It's protective. If it gets too high, again, you want to look at these other systems of the body and say, well, why is this creeping up? It's anti-inflammatory. Believe it or not, we think cholesterol is the opposite. We see it getting up. We think heart disease. We think the arteries are clogging. We think arteriosclerosis. We think, oh gosh, they're going to get a stroke, heart attack. But actually, cholesterol is anti-inflammatory. And there are studies that show that it inhibits inflammatory markers, such as the proleucins, specifically the 1-betas, but it's really just a bunch of cytokines. That might be a word that you're more related to than the interleukins. But it does decrease or inhibit inflammation for sure. So that's important, right? Because really we're saying, if it's anti-inflammatory, the body should be working properly, you should have good cholesterol levels, and everything should be happy. But if we start seeing cholesterol rise, we now know that it's anti-inflammatory. Think about this. If it's anti-inflammatory, it's going to protect your body from inflammation, and you see cholesterol starting to rise into numbers you're not comfortable with, then you're going to say, hey, there might be some inflammation in the body, because this anti-inflammatory molecule, or we can call it just basically a marker, is telling us that there's inflammation. So that's the connection right there. You also need it to make your sex hormones. So your DHEA, your progesterone, your testosterone, your estrogen, you actually need cholesterol to make these hormones. So this is like a catch-22, right? You can look at this from so many different angles. You can say, well, if I'm taking a drug that's lowering my cholesterol, I may now not have enough cholesterol to make the hormones. So maybe my hormones are dropping because of that, right? Maybe I'm having a hormone imbalance because of that. You could also flip that, and let's say there's no drug involved, and you can say, do I have too much estrogen? right? Which would show a high cholesterol, right? Because you need cholesterol to make estrogen. If your body isn't processing your estrogen correctly, if it's not breaking it down, if it's depositing in estrogen receptors in the breasts and in different tissues of the body, if you're taking it in from exogenous sources, which is outside sources, you're just getting too much estrogen in from skincare and cosmetics and perfumes and plastics and waters, and your body can't process all this estrogen that's coming in correctly, you're going to see the cholesterol go high on your labs. So you have to look here. So that's really important. Every single cell actually needs cholesterol for replication. And this is really important because if you think about if the cell needs cholesterol to be healthy and it's lacking it, right? So if we take these medications to push it down, you're going to get cellular death. And cellular death is never a good thing. And that always leads to cysts and tumors and cancers, and just not a good thing if you learn about cellular death. The cell itself has a membrane, so that gives it its structure, its integrity, and so cholesterol is actually important for this, kind of like your construction structure, like this construction of the cell, and we call it the cell structure or the cell membrane. So trillions and trillions of cells need cholesterol for the cell membrane, and they actually call cholesterol the brain of the cell. We know sometimes we call the nucleus the center, the brain of the cell, but really that's how important cholesterol is for this integral keeping the cell together. And damaged cells, they usually have, you can get cellular death from damaged cells, but if the membrane starts damaging, it's going to, yes, lead to cell death, but it also can lead to just toxins coming into the cell and then killing the cell. So really, really important, cholesterol for cells. Another thing that cholesterol is super important for is the myelin sheath that surrounds the nerves. So your nerves are protected by this sheath. You can think of like an electrical cord has, your electrical wire is protected by the cord. That's kind of how I see it. You wouldn't want to just touch an electrical wire. You have a nice, protection around it. And that's kind of how I look at the myelin sheath. It surrounds your nerves and your spinal cord, and it protects them. And you need cholesterol to make this. So again, we're talking about low cholesterol and lowering it and pushing it down with medications. You might end up with neurological conditions. There's this numbness, this tingling when people come in. They're like, I can't get rid of this numbness in my foot. I can't get rid of this stuff. MS, all these different things that can be a neurological condition when someone comes in. I want to dig deeper. And first thing I'll ask them too is like, what is your heart history? What is, your labs look like? Are you on any medications? And we discuss that. The other connection between neurological conditions and cholesterol is your brain synapses, or your nerve synapses. So these are like the connections between the nerve cells, and they need cholesterol. And actually, the brain needs cholesterol in large amounts. And we don't talk about this. This is actually getting newer and newer. So I know if you have been listening to social media, this is the thing that's getting out there where they're linking if you're taking a statin, and I'm seeing this all over Instagram, so I'm sharing something that is in studies, it's in the books that I've mentioned, but it's also all over social media, that if you take a drug to lower cholesterol, that you have an increased risk for dementia. That is what we're seeing in social media. The connection between that is that your brain actually needs a large amount of cholesterol to connect these nerve cells, and it also needs it to function optimally. The highest amount of cholesterol in the body is actually in the brain. So you're at risk for dementia, depression, cognitive impairment. They talk about memory loss. They even talk about in the book suicide and things like that. So it's really, really interesting. When I work with ADD, ADHD, memory problems, we talk with MTHFR, I do leaky gut, and we talk about all this stuff. And we see impairment in the brain and memories and too. So, not with the kids, they're not typically on these drugs, but I definitely look at cholesterol for the kids. But when we get older, sometimes you start seeing the problems that you see in the kids, you see in the elders, is the point I'm trying to make. And I want to always see it, is this drug related? Like, what is going on here? Bile is needed. So bile breaks down fats. It helps you break down fat in digestion, and you need cholesterol to make bile. So that's really important. And they have actual studies that show that meds that lower cholesterol, the side effect to those are GI problems. So a lot of digestion issues and digestion problems are linked with the bile issue and cholesterol. It's also needed to make vitamin D. And this is really interesting because I just mentioned when we first started out that high cholesterol can be a buoy, right? It could be a marker telling you, hey, something's wrong here. Like, can you look a little deeper? Can you dive deep and look? And I said to you that it could be inflammation, it could be an infection, right? But it could be an endocrine problem, a thyroid problem, things like that, dental issues. But I also said nutritional deficiencies. So there are studies that show that low vitamin D is actually linked to heart disease. So there's one of your links that's actually there. They don't have these studies that are showing high cholesterol linked to it, but they do show vitamin D linked to it. So it's quite interesting that 50 to 80% risk of cardiovascular disease if you have a depleted vitamin D or low, and that's from a Framingham study. And the NHANES survey, they surveyed about 13,000 adults, and they saw a connection between low vitamin D and cardiovascular disease. You need cholesterol to make vitamin D. So do you see how important cholesterol is in the body? And us lowering it isn't really doing us disservice. My father has had 2 open heart surgeries and a heart attack, and I'm very well versed in heart disease. And I'm not against medications for heart disease and heart problems. I know if he's listening to this, he'll be like, it's saving me. But there's also, I really worked very hard on cardiovascular disease before I got into leaky gut because of my father. And I can assure you, I've been doing this for over 26 years now. And we have done really well. And I say we because my office is a team. My patients and I are a team. This isn't just me. I give the information and the patients do all the work. So I say we. We have reversed diabetes. We have reversed cardiovascular diseases. We've brought cholesterol to a normal level. Cholesterol sometimes is up. They say 50% of the time with heart disease, but 50% of patients that actually have heart disease don't have high cholesterol. It's not the best marker, and I've known that in the 90s. It's like, really don't over focus on this. My next podcast is going to go into each marker and why I'm saying this and what each one of them are. But just to let you know that when I talk about medication, I'm not totally against, it has its place is what I'm trying to say. But it's just being prescribed very young now. They're starting to prescribe all these drugs like to 30 and 40-year-olds. So it's getting a little bit out of control for sure. And I think that the problem has to be looking for the cause of why the cholesterol is high before prescribing. The last thing I want to say for the points towards cholesterol is like babies need it. Babies actually need it. It's in the breast milk. It's for neurological brain development. So it's really not a dangerous thing. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to get you think. It is actually essential by every cell in the body. It's needed. And we do have an epidemic problem right now in our country. We have hormonal problems, we have endocrine problems, we have adrenal issues, we have nutritional deficiencies, we have leaky gut on a level we've never seen before, and people just don't want to do the leaky gut work and find out about this. And I don't mean to put you guys down, but I've been doing this for so long, and it's just poo-pooed a lot, and really that is a big, big core, because the inflammation starts there when your body is attacking foods that you don't do well with, or you might have a parasite in there, you might have yeast in there, I've seen all this type of things. It's not just parasites either. And you have to know how to get rid of these things. I see all over social media people guessing. There's specific steps, very easy, but specific steps. If you're missing a step, it won't work well. There's infections going around. Again, we talked about dental. We talked about infections that leave the gut and get into the bloodstream. We live in a toxic world, right? So can't be perfect in this, but definitely heavy metals and, plastics and all these things that we're being exposed to. Ladies, I always bring up all the cosmetics. I can't believe how many people are just so focused on makeup and skincare and trying to look, like they're 20. That's a lot of those cosmetics and skincare stuff are estrogen displacers. Same with your water. So we have an epidemic of everything I just mentioned. And so these are the things that are going to drive up cholesterol. So what I'd like you to take away on this podcast is if you're having high cholesterol, pause, stop, just stop, pause, be silent, and just think, hey, is this a buoy? Is this trying to tell me that something else is going on? Do I have a hormonal problem? Do I have a thyroid problem? Am I going through menopause? Did I just have a baby? Men, do you have low testosterone, high testosterone? Do you have a nutritional deficiency? Do you have a folate deficiency? Do you have a glutathione problem? Do you have really bad dental issues? Root canals, right? They lock bacteria in your in your gums, and then you have bacteria in your gums right near your bloodstream. Like, there's lots of things that this could be. I'm just talking about a few that are coming off the top of my head and in my notes in front of me because I got a little outline going on. But I just want you to think. Just think cholesterol is not your enemy. It is not, and I'm going to get into the next podcast because it's not actually a fat. So it's not clogging your arteries. It's an alcohol. We're going to talk about this. So let's jump into the next podcast together. But just take a pause and think that it's really not your enemy. Okay, so that's a thinker, right? It's a really big thinker, and I will mention the books again so you don't have to go to the beginning. The Statin Disaster by David Brownstein, and also check out Barbara O'Neill. They're good sources, and if you need me, I love to talk to you about this. You can go to my website, drlisasolsenti.com, and you can click on the consultation and book a consultation with me. And I look forward to meeting you. Thank you.